Now, as we mentioned a few moments ago, pseudo-stratified means false stratified. So it's really simple columnar epithelium. But at first glance, when you look at it, the cells are going to appear to be stratified. So this is falsely stratified. It's actually a single layer of columnar cells. And what we'll see is that the nuclei are not going to all line up really nice and neatly as they did with the simple columnar epithelium, even though in fact it is simple columnar epithelium, but we call it pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Now, some of this is not ciliated. For instance, in the ducts within the testes that are going to be responsible for carrying sperm, as well as the ducts or the tubes within some large glands. Some pseudostratified columnar epithelium is ciliated, however, such as within the trachea and in the upper parts of the respiratory tract. The cilia in these cases are going to be moving mucus that helps to line our respiratory tract and help get rid of dust and dirt and pathogens. So here we see kind of a low magnification picture of ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue. Now, first thing that should pop out at you is this thing right here, and that looks like a goblet. And in fact it is. So the fact that we have a goblet cell tells us that this is columnar epithelium. But to be honest with you, it's a kind of a low magnification, so I would be hesitant to ask you a question like this on the test. I would be way more likely to put a picture like this. So here we see, definitely have cilia, definitely have column-shaped cells, but look over here. Here's a nucleus, here's a nucleus, here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one. So you see how they're found at all these different levels? So they're column-shaped, but the arrangement of the nuclei tells us that this would be ciliated, pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. And there we see that goblet cell again, and that verifies that this is, in fact, ciliated. There's the cilia here. Pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. So transitional epithelium is the last of the epithelial tissues that we're going to be talking about. And this tissue is rather unique. Now, transitional epithelium doesn't have the word stratified or simple in the name, and that's because transitional epithelium is always stratified. So we can assume the word stratified in the name and just call it transitional epithelium. And we're going to find transitional epithelium lining the lumen, so lining the space inside of the urinary bladder, or within the lumen of the ureters, which are the tubes that are going to be carrying urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. And the interesting thing about transitional epithelium is that the cells are able to be stretched. And this is a big advantage when the urinary bladder is filling up with urine. The cells will enable the urinary bladder to stretch without having the urine start to leak out. The cells of the transitional epithelium tend to be round or oval shaped when they are not stretched, and they're going to be flattened or more squamous like when they are going to be stretched. And we find these cells in the urinary bladder and within the ureters, as well as part of the urethra, and the urethra being the tube that's going to be carrying urine from the bladder, urinary bladder, to the outside of the body. All right, what do you see here that you recognize? Do you see that there's a lumen? There's a space inside. So before you freak out, remember, start with what you know. So we can tell because of the presence of the lumen here that this is probably an epithelial tissue. And we're looking here, we're going to tend to see these kind of roundish cells, especially close to the lumen. And as we move further away from the lumen, they might look a little bit less rounded and almost more squamous-like. So this is a real good example of transitional epithelium right here. And here's a slightly different picture of transitional epithelium. And here in this case, these deeper cells aren't necessarily going to be flatter. They're going to tend to be more rounded, like the ones that are superficial close to the lumen. So transitional epithelium here. And this ends our discussion on epithelial tissues.